Okay, well, we'll get started here this morning. It's a couple minutes after. I don't know if we'll have anybody else joining us. Wanted to talk a little bit today, just about some buyer preparations and a little sort of proactive couple of tips and stuff like that that we can use. Obviously, our market is pretty active, and there's still a fair amount of pressure on buyers. Oftentimes that pressure can kind of build up and just sort of boil up and cause some trepidation, cause a little bit of hesitation, cause some uncertainty. So a couple of things to go over just in really just sort of helping them navigate through what obviously is still a challenging market for buyers to be in. And I mean, I know that firsthand. I've put a couple offers on houses myself over the last few weeks and been unsuccessful. So there's certainly some challenging situations there. So if any of you have a good listing coming up with a decent house that has parking for a 19-foot boat, please let me know. I'd be happy to take a look at it. Before we jump into that though, I'm going to send an email out today, a little bit of an office update. But I just wanted to talk about sometimes something that's confusing, and I have a page one of a contract of purchase and sale here, but you'll see sort of how confusing it is a little bit. There's been a number of negotiations back and forth on this one, and we have a mismatch of initials. You can see in the yellow there's a number of matching initials, but the three orange circles there right in the middle, those are three sets of random initials that don't have a matching one. Oftentimes it will get missed, and we'll just agree to sort of one change in these types of scenarios where there is something like, as a third party, we may understand that the buyer thinks they have an accepted offer, the seller thinks they have an accepted offer. The risk being, if somebody has a change of heart, or something comes up, a better offer comes up, for example, it could be argued that these three initials here in the middle indicated an alteration or a counter of some type in the contract that wasn't acknowledged or wasn't accepted. So from a contractual standpoint, it is easily arguable that this contract purchase and sale wasn't accepted because the initials don't match. If we have a contract with negotiations, and it doesn't have to be specific on price, it can be a date, it can be scratching out the 4 p.m. on the registration term in the contract, for example. The point is, we need to make sure that what we're looking at is 100% clear. And for me, as a third party looking at this contract, not entirely clear as to what is going on here. There's a belief that everybody's agreed to it, but there's still an opportunity for a challenge and an argument here. And we want to avoid that. So if we are going back and forth, in the end, when we're looking at an accepted offer, we want to make sure that if there are two sets of buyer initials, we have two sets of seller initials. If there are three sets of seller initials, we have three sets of buyer initials. And that way there's absolute certainty that all the changes that have been made and have been agreed to, and you can tell really just by looking at it that it is a little confusing. I'll send this out in more detail later. So in the end, the key is just to make sure that if there's three or four initials from one party, we've got a matching three or four initials from another party. There is an alternative way to provide some certainty in that respect, and I'll touch on that in the email as an alternative option moving forward. But ideally, always make sure that we have the same number of signings and that everything matches, so that there is certainty and clarity, and we're certain that everybody has agreed to everything in question. Comments, thoughts? Do a little round table here and check in, and I'll start in the top left corner. David, you're hanging out up there. Do you got anything you want to kind of share, touch on this week? How's your week been?
No, week's been pretty good. I had the one question I asked you about yesterday, but other than that, we're good.
Okay. Short and sweet. Dawn, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. My clients in Duncan, they've listed their house. I'm not the listing agent, but it went live today. So that's exciting because now they're doing more than just shopping down here. So hopefully in the next couple of days, we'll see something that they want to put an offer in.
And you're in touch with the listing realtor in Duncan, like you have a good line of communication with them just to make sure that you know, when they find something down here, you guys are going to be able to align, obviously, you know, the sale of their place with the purchase down here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. That'll obviously be really important because they're obviously going to be, you know, looking to having to sell to buy. It's tough when you know, when you're working for a client that's working with another realtor. Understandably, you know, they may want to work with somebody locally in the Duncan market that, you know, is there all the time. And I mean, that's, you know, not an unreasonable thought or expectation, but yeah, if you're not involved in that transaction, for example, sometimes it can definitely be a little challenging. So we just have to be a little more diligent so that we know exactly where everybody is in the process.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sure I'll be calling.
What's that?
I'm sure I'll be calling you.
Standing by with my phone.
Okay.
Emily, you got your first listing, isn't it?
It's my first solo listing,
Yeah.
since I've been individual. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it went really well. I'm lucky it went very smooth, like start to finish, smooth. One of the offers was subject to sale. So then I was like, oh boy, here we go. I always said to myself, okay, I'll, you know, cross that bridge when I get to it, but we didn't end up accepting that offer anyways. So yeah, good for now, but you know, subject to sale, when that kind of happens, it makes it a little more difficult, you know. So anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that went well. And then last night also finally sent an offer for one of my clients that's been looking for a very long time. So last night was one busy night for me. It's like when it rains, it pours.
Fantastic. So you got an accepted offer on your listing and you wrote a purchase contract for a buyer client of yours?
Correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, busy night.
So your listing, how did you put that out? Was it just open first come first serve offer wise? Did you have competing offers? Was there a
yeah, so it was just first come first serve. We were just kind of like, let's just, you know, go for it.
Yeah.
And then we had one offer. I wanted them open 24 hours. We had one offer that came in first day, and then another competing offer that came in yesterday. And then the first offer, as soon as I said, we have another competing offer, they revised their initial offer.
Okay. And so there was a competing offer situation.
Yeah.
So when you submit that documentation, you do need to submit the unsuccessful offer.
Okay.
With the disclosure, with the seller's remuneration disclosure. We don't necessarily need all of the you know, title PDS, but the Real Estate Services Act and BCFSA, as far as regulation goes, in competing offer situations, all offers must be submitted and kept on file with the brokerage. If you look at the checklist, there's a spot in the Remax Generation checklist that has the competing offers space or slot.
Okay.
So the seller remuneration disclosure and the unsuccessful contract purchase and sale need to go in there, because we as a brokerage are required to keep all offers in competing situations. And this has been a policy, not a policy, but it's been a rule that's been in place for a couple of years. So just as a friendly reminder, you know, if anybody has a listing and you're in a competing offer situation, the successful offer will obviously be input, you know, in the normal fashion, but just make sure that all of the contract of purchase and sale with the corresponding disclosure of remuneration to sellers are submitted as well. So that is a legal requirement that we do not have the ability to tamper with. And it is something that will, come up sort of in audit type situations and so on and so forth. So our job as the brokerage and staff is to make sure that we have, these files that are complete and 100% accurate, representing the transactions that we're involved in, be it a listing and a sale, a simple, buyer side transaction, or a listing with a buyer transaction coming outside from another brokerage. So just as a reminder, listings with multiple offers, everything must come to the brokerage. So David, you had your hand up a second ago.
It was just more of a thought. I've seen a couple times now where a property has come to market. There's no offers, does not break any rules, as in we're accepting offers at a certain point, but then they take an offer when they still have like a bushel full of showings. To me, it makes no sense. Am I just missing something that I'm not understanding, or are they just trying to take the first thing that comes along? It seems like a disservice to their sellers.
Yeah, ultimately, it's going to be up to the seller on how they want to do that. So, we do have the direction for the presentation of offers form with the Victoria Real Estate Board. The Vancouver Island Board has one also. When you're listing the property, it's a really important conversation to have with your seller. If you anticipate, a lot of activity, if you anticipate multiple offers, you may want to provide that direction for the presentation. So that would be, we are going to look at offers on Tuesday at, 5 o'clock in the evening. Please leave your offers open until such time. We will look at preemptive offers, or we will not look at preemptive offers. There's a number of ways that can go. Sometimes the seller is just happy to say, look, first come, first serve. The people that get in and make an offer, obviously, they're the lucky ones. We're happy to deal with them, as they come in. Chances are, in a market like this, as Emily, just experienced, you may end up in a multiple offer situation anyway, even though you're not necessarily setting the table to look at multiple offers, you can still end up in a multiple offer situation. So the key is the conversation with the seller and how do we want to look at it? Are we just going to leave it open, first come, first serve, or are we going to set a time to allow as many people through as possible, and then we'll wait and see, what comes of it at the end of the day? Important for buyer agents, obviously, to understand those situations as well, and also recognize, if there is a direction, such as we will look at offers Monday at 5 p.m., that when a realtor states that is the procedure that must be followed. They cannot change that unless there is specific instruction to change that. And then notice of that change needs to be delivered to everybody who has expressed interest, or everybody who is under the impression that they will be looking at offers at 5 on Monday. If that changes in any way whatsoever, notice has to go out and be delivered to everybody so that everybody is aware of the change as far as the direction goes. Typically, that's done by touch base. Oftentimes it can be, a text message or an email or something like that, but notice has to go out of any changes once directions have been put forward. It can be a little challenging too, for sure, David, because but again, ultimately it's the direction and the path that's decided between you as the listing realtor and the seller of the property.
So Darren, that wouldn't count then if they put that disclosure in, that they would consider preempted offers?
Well, if they're considering, so the disclosure form that says, we are going to look at offers on X date, it actually specifies you will look at preemptive offers or you will not consider preemptive offers. Generally speaking, if you're going to, look at offers on Monday, if you're going to look at a preemptive offer, be prepared to make sure as the listing realtor that you're ready to go. If an offer comes in, you make sure everybody is aware that you're going to be looking at another offer, so they have an opportunity to present prior to the date specified. It can be a little less challenging, like for a realtor even, I mean, having a date set to look at offers is great. But having them, reviewed as they come in, entirely the seller's option, and just as, can be just as simple or even just as confusing at times. It just depends on the property, the listing, the activity, the strategy behind the marketing and stuff. So that in the end, the key is if you put out direction or instructions, you can't change it unless you notify everybody of the change. Because the listing realtors who do that will end up in front of a panel at the Victoria Real Estate Board, and they'll get their hands slapped and face some education requirements or whatever penalties that might be imposed by the board. Any other comments there? We'll circle back to Larry here and check in, see how his week's going.
So far, so good, I guess. I delivered a condo yesterday, so that was sort of a bit of a nightmare originally, but she's happy as a pig and you know what.
Oh yeah, it completed?
So, yeah, completed, yeah, and she's in
Yeah.
and everybody's happy, so.
It's fantastic.
I'm just, doing my calls, trying to catch up on all the calls I haven't made yet.
Yeah.
Trying to stir the business up, and that's where we sit.
Perfect. It's always it's a never ending challenge, really. It's it's nice obviously when deals are completing or rolling through, but we always definitely have to kind of keep our foot on the gas a little bit just to make sure we've got some business coming down the road and in the future.
Yeah, which is easy not to do when you've got deals on the go.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Yeah.
And then you hit that moment of whoops, there's nothing booked for July and August. Then you start the panic mode. So I think we've all been there. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Chad, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Nothing too crazy this week. A couple showings, doing some door knocking, my calls, of course. Yeah. Nothing too crazy.
Awesome. Any active buyers on the go, or?
There's a few that are looking, but they're not in a hurry. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they just kind of waiting to see? Are they waiting?
I think they're waiting for the perfect house.
Okay. Yeah. And have you had sort of the conversations around what's the must have, what can you live with, what can you live without, and what are the key things? The challenge obviously right now is inventory and stuff, but
And they're in lower price points, so there's not much new things coming up for them.
Yeah, and at a lower price point, that's probably going to be a little more challenging now, especially with the 25-point hike that we saw yesterday. So
Yeah.
Andy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, business as usual. I'm going to do a listing appointment tomorrow up in Sydney. Some prospects. I can't really call them clients. They've been in my pipeline for about a year and they're really, really, really picky. I'm interested to go see what they have because they're just absolutely love their place. They did a bunch of custom work, millwork to their place and the closet organizers and everything, right? So I mean, obviously they love their place, but what they don't love about it is they don't really have a backyard for their dog.
Yeah.
So, and it has to be in Sydney and it has to be, around $1 million. And they have to get the right price for their place if they're going to sell it, and the place that they're moving into has to be just as good as theirs, if not better, with a backyard. So, I mean, I have no delusions of grandeur. I'm going to go in there and just give them a CMA, talk to them, look at their stuff and just say, this is where it's at. I'm not going to waste too much time with them because I just know that they're really, really picky. I'm hoping that the stars align just so and a unicorn comes down and falls in my lap. But, that's where I sit right now with them. So I love going up to Sydney anyway. I could go up there every day. It's just so beautiful. So I was up there actually yesterday, met with Chase Whitson from McDonald, and I was looking at a couple townhomes up there that he's building, and they're really, really nice. So I'm hoping I can sell them for him. I know Amin already sold one of them, so we shall see.
So the listing, when you're talking about your CMA, like are you looking at pointing out a price, or are you giving them a little bit of a range of what they could expect?
Well, I mean, I'm going to give them a range of what they could expect to get for their home. Obviously, I'm going to have to, talk to them a bit more in detail. I'm going to take all my disclosures up and stuff and talk to them a bit more in detail about the whole sell buy scenario and how important it is to really, if they're serious about, if they like this place, first is first, right? If they like this place and they want to buy it, then we have to hash a plan out, right? We have to really make sure that we get their place all sealed up, dolled up, and ready for market. And then, hopefully the place that they love is still on the market, before we go in.
And it sounds like they have, a certain little bit of an emotional attachment to their property. Just the way you sort of described, what their improvements and stuff like that are. So maybe, touching lightly, on a level where, realizing and understanding and respecting, the emotional attachment to the benefits and the work that they've done. It may not necessarily be the same emotional attachment that's coming from a buyer, and, they may not view it as valuable as you do. And that's not anything, personal or anything judgy. It's just, they likely won't have the same emotional attachments to all the improvements that you do, which could in fact, or affect what their perception of the value is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish that I was doing it the other way around, like, because I'm going to go meet them at their place, because I've actually never met them in person. It's just been a phone call here and there and some emails. But I'm going to go take a look at their place, take some pictures. My idea around this is it's going to be a 2-part listing scenario where I hear about the things that they've done, the things that they love, take some pictures, be sympathetic to everything, and it's such a beautiful place, yada yada yada, and then basically just go show them the place that they're interested in. I kind of wish I would show them the place that they're interested in first before, but I mean, it's just the way it was put together. So I don't have my hopes up too much, but it's going to be a good training for me, because I mean, dealing with sell by clients is a whole new avenue that I've never been involved in. And it seems like if you put the time and effort into it and you get really good at it, obviously the payoff's quite good, and but there's a lot of moving parts that I'm going to be calling on you to help me with if they do.
And I think at the very least, walk in there and, intend on securing the listing. Even if the agreed price, comes in a little bit over and above, you're going to have documentation on what your recommendations and what your suggestions are based on your CMA and your conversations. But, you'll have that information to fall back on and leverage, if, the listing is not selling, or they're not getting what they want, or people just aren't seeing the same value that they do, right? So, but securing the listing in the end, it may run, it may expire, they may not find the place they want. You can always have it listed, and you can always protect them, by if somebody does come along and make an offer, or just make it aware, in advance that the seller, has to have someplace to go before they're going to sell their property. So any offers might have to be conditional upon, the seller entering an unconditional agreement to purchase. But you'll get, marketing benefits, and you'll get buyer inquiries, you'll get, potential business just by having the listing and having, the ability to market and display that. So there's always a benefit, even if the listing is a tough one, and, it's $150,000 more than it should be. In the end, you're going to get some opportunity out of it. You will get calls, you will get inquiries, and you will get some benefit from it.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it. you know, really want to make sure that they're going to be getting what they want because they're so picky. You know, it's taken them this long, and I look at their activity on the Matrix portal, and they're there almost every single day. So it's taken like a year for them to find this, like, and you know, who's saying that I put the listing up and then, you know, all these places that, you know, these two, because there's 4 townhomes on Maryland, 2 of them are already gone.
Yeah.
And
Andy,
yeah,
it might be worth having a conversation with them around their expectations and how realistic are they, and, you know, everything that's involved, because they're going to end up putting themselves out of the market because they'll never find exactly what they're looking for. You know, or if they find something that they're looking for, but,
yeah.
you know, slight modifications might make that perfect house. I mean, that, you know, they might have to look at that kind of a possibility.
Well, and then there's the whole financial discussion too, because I mean, I know for sure that they're not going to get, you know, enough money for their place to upgrade to a brand spanking new place, you know. So I mean, it's just going to be a lesson in people skills, really.
Yeah.
And I'm up for the challenge, so I'm just going to go and see what happens. And yeah,
Perfect. Ron, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is a good discussion, and I've got some different thoughts than some of you. Where I've seen realtors struggle the most is by spending too much time with people that aren't in a position to make a move. And you got to get them to be realistic about the value of their place, or everything you're doing is a donation of your time. You might get a learning experience from it, but you're not going to get a paycheck if they have expectations that are out of line with their place, particularly if they have to find something before they sell. If they have to find something before they sell and you're going to make an offer subject to sale and they want to ask more than it's worth, they're not moving.
Yeah, good. I mean, obviously, you know, anything that they do find that is going to be subject to sale, and the first thing the seller is going to ask is, well, is the property listed? How much is it? And they're going to look at it, and they're going to talk to their realtor, and the realtor is going to advise them on whether they think they're nuts on selling their place for what they're asking, or, you know, what the relative chances of a successful deal are.
you know, yeah, really, it's going to come down to whether they like the place enough or not to get rid of their baby that they've been living in for so long. And not only that, but do they have the money above and beyond what the market dictates they're going to get for their place? Because I mean, I agree with Ron. I mean, if those don't align, then there's no real point. You know, you're just,
When you meet with them, you've got to ask, ultimately, the tough questions are, you know, what is it going to mean to you if you can't get this price that you have in mind? You know, are you going to have another option? Are you going to, you know, are you going to move, or are you just going to stay here if you don't get that price? If their answer is, well, we're just going to stay here if we don't get that price, go find another customer.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that they would be, most people would be open to that frank discussion and appreciate the honesty, you know, because I'm there to sell their place, not list it, right, and get them to where they want to be. So sometimes you got to have those hard, you know, discussions and tell them, like Ryan always says, you know, not necessarily what they want to hear, but what they need to hear, you know, to get the job done.
It's a tough one, and it certainly takes you know, a certain level of confidence and composure to really challenge a potential client on what their idea and what their perspective of things are. Really tough to be a seller and a buyer in any given market, you know, because they're going to probably want top dollar for what the property is they're selling, but they're probably also going to want the best deal for whatever it is they're buying. So, you know, touching on those points and really, you know, understanding the perspective, you know, if we're going to market it, we're going to sell it, you know, or are we going to sell it, or are we just going to put a sign on the lawn? You know, if we're going to sell it, this is what we can reasonably expect. And when we're out looking at homes, we're now in a buyer mindset. understanding that, we have a limited supply. It is a very competitive marketplace. And, we're gonna have to be likely pretty aggressive and pretty firm with the terms and conditions that we come forward with, because it's just not, being a buyer certainly doesn't afford some of the luxuries that most sellers are experiencing in this market, which is putting their house up, waiting a few days and looking at a bunch of offers. It's a much tougher scenario to be a buyer than it is a seller. Have we missed anybody so far? I think we've got everybody that's on camera, and I see a couple of off cameras, but if anybody wants to share any sort of buyer stories and stuff like that, please feel free. I wanted to just talk a little bit about some proactive tips and proactive measures, and when you're out and you're showing your buyers around. There's a lot of things that I've seen over the years that develop through the process of, once a contract of purchase and sale is written, and making sure that the buyer is duly prepared before that contract of purchase and sale is actually written, can preemptively deal with a lot of the challenges that come through. Some of the bigger challenges, obviously, financing is obviously a big one, and having a secure lender or buyer's financing obviously dealt with in advance is super critical in this market. You may get an offer that's subject to financing accepted, but where we are currently, we're certainly seeing lots of competitive situations with unconditional offers. So having the financing secure well in advance is super big. And when you're looking at properties, measuring expectations. And making sure that buyers are aware. If somebody's buying a 1985 home, they're buying a 1985 home. They're not buying a new house. There are going to be issues and challenges, and ensuring having those conversations. When you're looking through and your buyer is thinking, well, it needs windows, it needs this, it needs that, it needs this, it needs that. That's the same conversation that the listing agent had with the seller when they came up with the price. So, any of those little sort of visual elements that potentially open the door, or, for, perhaps an adjustment, or perhaps a better deal here and there. Ultimately, the seller knows and is aware of all that. And those considerations that a buyer is having when preparing their offer are the same considerations that a seller has had when they've been preparing their house and setting the price to come to market. Oh, sorry, Andy, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that financing thing. I'm obviously in this market right now for especially certain properties where we're having situations where it's multiple offers, and the only way to really have a chance is to go in unconditional. Make sure you have all your ducks in a row beforehand, and that your clients are comfortable with what that means, especially around financing. Like, I made sure that I tell all my clients, give the mortgage broker or whoever you're dealing with, mobile mortgage specialist, all the information that they ask for beforehand, so that when a situation like this arises, you're able to be able to pull the trigger. Now we have the 3-day cooling off period, which is nice for buyers, to do that extra little bit of due diligence. I asked the mortgage broker in my situation, hey, what's the turnaround time for your lenders right now to approve, a place for financing? And I was told that it's not uncommon to get same-day approval right now, especially if they've been pre-approved and they have all the information necessary for the lenders. Now, I did reach a situation where that wasn't the case, and I went in unconditional, and I had that 3-day rescission to secure that financing, but it came down to the very last day, like the 11th hour, for me to decide whether or not, or ask my clients whether or not they felt comfortable moving forward. They were approved conditionally. You know, the mortgage broker said they've approved it, but there's still some conditions on there because they have to read through all the strata docs. They haven't finished reading through all the strata docs yet, but they felt comfortable enough to say they approved it. Nothing in writing, of course. So it was a nail biter situation for me. And I leveled up with the mortgage broker and I said, what happened to this same day approval situation? Well, that was with, you know, the original lender who backed out because there was a minor discrepancy between the ROI and the pay stub. And now he had to go, you know, to 4 or 5 other lenders to try to make this deal happen. So it was pretty precarious, to say the least. And then he can come back to me and he says, you know, the lenders don't look at the 3-day rescission period and it shouldn't be used as a substitute for a subject to finance. And I was thinking, well, I can kind of understand that, but I mean, that's exactly what it was brought in to be in the first place, is to give some sort of due diligence period for buyers in a hot market like we're in. So I was thinking, well, you know, I understand what the mortgage broker is telling me, you know, and I was like, well, if that's the case, then those lenders don't get our business. And he's like, well, those lenders don't need your business. They don't care. You know, they want all the time. You could give them 10 days, business days, and they'll take 9 business days and 23 hours to make their decision. It's brutal. So
it's really tough. And, you know, the challenge there, even with pre-approval, you know, the pre-approval comes, you know, says, yes, based on your income and your debt load and your servicing ratios, we'll approve you for this much money, but we also want to qualify the house and the property. And so, you know, even though a client is pre-approved, doesn't necessarily mean that the lender is going to like the property. And in particular with stratas, you know, you're talking about financial statements and depreciation reports, and you know, you've got strata fees and all that other stuff to consider. So you have zoning, you know, you have some lenders that don't love you know, tourist accommodation or transient type zonings because of the risk of you know, a potential commercial operation. So there's a number of factors out there, and you know, the challenge that we are seeing, you know, and it's fairly easy to see. You see it every time you see an unconditional contract that has a term built in it for the buyer's appraiser to come in on 24 hours notice. You know, they're not a cash buyer. They're financing the property and they're hoping to get it done, you know, prior to completion. Those types of elements, there's a lot of risk that comes with that. It's something that I've noticed a lot, and it'll be interesting to see, especially with the escalating, you know, rate hikes, is are we going to see some, you know, some of these pending deals collapse because, you know, we don't have financing or, you know, at risk a buyer losing a deposit. Moreover, you know, not necessarily just having to pay the rescission penalty if they back out within their period, but potentially losing the deposit because while they were pre-approved, the property wasn't, or the property didn't meet or meet the criteria for what the lender was willing to lend on based on the pre-approval information that they had. So it's a really risky position. You definitely want to make sure that things are aligned. The rescission period it's a bit of a backwards policy, and I mean we all know that that's sort of typical of government, and there were a number of alternative ideas and thoughts put forward, and I think coming up, but the rescission period will be reviewed, and we're going to probably see some amendments to the cooling off period, and it's probably going to come a little bit more on the listing side of things as opposed to the contract to purchase and sale side of things. You know, initially when the government announced that they were going to enact this policy, you know, there was a token effort to have a discussion and collaborate with, you know, the professionalism and the industry itself as far as what will work and what won't work. The government had already decided what they were going to do, and they just went forward with it anyway. Some of the, you know, the conversational elements and the consultation elements that came out of those conversations are likely going to be put in place when we see the revision coming, you know, in the next probably 4 to 6 months. And it's probably going to look something like a pre-offer period, which will be more like a 5-day exposure or a 5-day listing. That, you know, a seller will not enter into a contract, you know, 5 days prior to exposing the property to the market, which will give buyers, you know, more opportunity, and even it'll give the buyers an opportunity to really even understand if they can, based on, you know, what the listing is, and potentially the cooling off 3 days will probably still enact, but there's likely going to be something, you know, pre-contract of purchase and sale, where there's a time or a space or a limit that's going to allow potential buyers in really hot markets to conduct some due diligence to ensure they actually can make an offer without being subject to, you know, a penalty of some kind. Because it's a bit imbalanced at the moment, and you know, it's a challenge for both parties. It's a challenge for buyers because they risk a penalty in markets that are forcing them to make really aggressive moves and really aggressive offers. And it's also a bit of a holding period for a seller. They're not certain if, you know, they're going to be able to move forward with perhaps purchasing or laddering, making a move to another property, downsizing, or whatever it may be. So it's created a bit of a gray area, you know, once the offer is accepted. And I think too, you know, I think within our office, we all have a pretty good understanding of the rescission, but I'm seeing stuff on, you know, social media. There's still, you know, quite a bit of confusion out there around the rescission, which is unfortunate because, you know, we've all had plenty of opportunity and there's lots of resources available out there. But, you know, when we are negotiating and acting and presenting on behalf of buyers, we need to make sure that that is calculated and filled in properly. We've seen a few contracts come in where the rescission information hasn't been completed. Whether it's completed or not, you know, it's a trackable document, but you want to make sure that that information is completed. We've seen where listing agents haven't put the information in, they haven't put a final acceptance date in, and so on and so forth. And those are just holes that are going to cause us problems. So I guess just a reminder for our paperwork when we're dealing with CPS is make sure everything is filled in correctly. Who do we got? Moving on a little bit, you know, talking a little bit about what was that, Ron?
I just did a little search on Matrix, and when you overprice listings, they sit there and don't sell, and they clutter your life with people going, how come it's not sold yet? How come you haven't shown it to anyone? Are you doing an open house again tomorrow? Where did you advertise it this week?
Managing expectations, right? We kind of went down that path a little bit a few minutes ago in sort of just walking through, and you know, our initial showings and stuff with buyers, the more time we spend with them at a property, you know, the better it's gonna be. And the more that we you know, education courses, you know, like the know your product type courses, you know, Andy, you've got obviously a bit of an edge over most when, you know, when it comes to issues like plumbing and that kind of stuff. You can see and identify any potential pitfalls. We can all look, you know, at a window or a furnace or something, you know, and give some guidance as to, you know, the impact of what that might be. Inspection reports are obviously, you know, really challenging sometimes. They, depending on who the inspector is, depending on sort of what their procedure is, there can be a lot of sort of doom and gloom and, you know, really sort of impactful type things. If we're looking at a house and we see that shingles are curling, you know, it's expected that, you know, probably some point within the next 5 years, we're going to have to replace that. We know that. We know they're asking 1.5 million. They know that. That's not necessarily something that they're going to be willing to, you know, give a bunch of money on. Everything that we can see, the seller's already seen it. and they're aware of it based on their listing price. And sometimes buyers don't necessarily see that perspective of things. They'll walk through and they'll see, oh, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do that, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do that. That relative conversation, you know, knowing, you know, the approximate age of the house, knowing the condition, you know, I can see that that furnace is original, you know, that's going to be a $10,000-$15,000 hit. We're aware of it. You know, that'll help when, you know, dealing with the negotiation, and it'll also help them when they're reviewing, if they're reviewing an inspection, as far as, you know, satisfying any conditions. The more we see, the more we recognize, the more we talk about it with our buyers as we're walking through, the less challenges we're going to have, and the more prepared they're going to be. Writing a contract of purchase and sale for a buyer that's had a quick walkthrough of a property, hasn't really looked at it other than just grazing through it, you know, will often end up in challenging situations, and it'll often create a situation where a buyer questions whether they've made the right decision, and whether they want to move forward, whether they're willing to accept the risk, and so on and so forth. So the more we can show, the more value that we can provide in advance, and the more prepared we can make our buyer prior to them signing that contract of purchase and sale, will ultimately help in a smoother transaction once we're dealing with conditions, if we have conditions to deal with, and getting to that commitment from where the buyer is willing to move forward. The challenges that come with, you know, buyer's remorse, you know, is a very common thing, and I'm sure we've all had a little bit of experience with it. If you haven't, you will. There'll always be, you know, somebody that will second guess, and even no matter how well you prepare them, you know, oftentimes it's going to come up. And I'm sure, you know, Ron, you've dealt with it a ton, and you know, one of the most effective ways in dealing with that and having that conversation with the buyer is, you know, asking them what they're going to think in a month, you know, in a month, or 60 days down the road, 6 months down the road. You're going to be, you know, you're going to be happy. You're going to be excited. You're going to be, you know, committed. So, I mean, if there is a waffle, you know, try to project, you know, a future thought or a future perception, you know, in 2 months, when we're still looking for a house and we're still looking at all the same stuff, you know, are you going to regret not following through with this actual purchase that we have in front of us? The commitment and the decision to either remove, you know, conditions or sign an unconditional agreement, you know, when you get there, you want to make sure that you've done everything possible to make sure that they fully understand what that commitment is, and be in a position and have gone through enough steps that you can fall back on a conversation, or fall back on an email, or fall back on something that says, you know, when we talked about this, just want to, you know, refresh. We had this conversation a little bit ago. We talked about this. We knew we understood before we got to this process. And then ultimately, you know, what are you going to think in a month if we're still looking at, you know, whatever it is, and things are different. We can't get, you know, what we're looking for. We're not seeing the product, or like, does this house work? Does it make sense? And you know all of it. You know what needs to be done. You know, it's a 20-year-old house. You know all of this stuff. You know, how are you going to feel in a month if you decide to let this go? Are you going to be kicking yourself? Is a really important question when they're struggling. Ron, do you have anything to add to that in dealing with you know, questions raised and stuff like that, like buyer remorse type situations?
I mean, buyer remorse is a normal part, and just, I think having a conversation before you even get to the contract, that's one of the things that they're likely going to experience, and tell them that, you know, when you feel that, that's normal. Almost everyone seems to go through that, you know, having second thoughts. And you know, there's other things you can be cautioning them on, like, you know, you talked about, you know, like, you want to still be looking in 2 months and seeing the same things. Well, what if you're looking in 2 months and all of a sudden the prices are now 20 grand higher for the same things. Is that a risk you want to take?
David, you had your hand up?
I just had a similar circumstance, the point you were bringing up with some clients I'm working with right now. The condo they like the look of, they took an offer immediately, only 2 days on sale with a bunch of showings still left. And they asked me if they should move up their timeline and be willing to make offers more quickly before they see things. And I told them that that's the quickest way to find buyer's remorse, because you want to have a sound strategy and move through it at your pace. You know, new listings come up all the time. And you know, when we're in a market like we were a couple of years ago, that prices are running away, you have to have slightly different advice. But, you know, I think we can all agree that prices aren't going to be running away from us in the next couple of months. And, you know, if people do change their strategy because they feel pressured when they don't need to, if you can calm them down, you're going to add a lot of value to them and probably keep them as clients.
100%, yeah. You know, and it all ties back to sort of managing expectations and making sure, you know, the goal is to successfully complete a contract and hand over some keys to your buyer. And you know, those types of conversations, David, are ideal in helping them prepare for, you know, what the next steps are going to be, making sure that they're secure, they're confident, and they're not in a position where they're feeling an overabundance of pressure and an overabundance of stress, because it is a stressful situation. It's a massive investment. It's a massive commitment. It's a massive purchase. It's a massive amount of debt, albeit secure debt. I mean, it's good debt as far as, you know, any sort of purchase is concerned, as long as it's reasonable, of course. But you know, there's a number of things that we can do, and you know, I think just where a lot of those challenges come in is when we rush into writing up a contract purchase and sale before we know our clients, or we should know our clients. We should be having obviously those heart-to-hearts and really digging in and understanding what's important to them, what their goals are, and what their expectations are, and making sure that we set the path for them to follow. And you know, as they follow along and they start to recognize some of the things that are happening that we've already had a conversation about, one, it's going to build confidence in them. Two, it's going to have them build confidence in you. And three, it's going to make the process a little bit easier for them. It's never going to be, you know, completely stress-free. It's always a challenging situation, but the proactive and the preemptive sort of techniques and tips and conversations that we can have are going to ultimately help the process in the end. So the preparation that comes before the contract of purchase and sale is probably more important than actually writing the contract of purchase and sale.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, of course.
Darren? Sorry, just what I picked up out of the first conversation was I've always worked by a 2 showing rule. You know, your first showing is sort of cursory, you do your thing. And I got caught, as Rob knows, we had a deal where we had the first showing, it was very quick. And then we were told it was going to offer. So we had to jump in and do multiple offers, which we won. We had a junk in the backyard. It was on half an acre, but there was junk in there that we missed. Only because we weren't that serious. We just sort of walked cursory out and back. And we do the offer, we move in, all of a sudden, the client's upset because all this junk is there, needs to be moved. It's a great big metal track. So just, I guess my learning on that was the first showing, get detailed. Look at those details in the first showing, the age of the fern, all that stuff that I usually put off to the second one.
Yeah.
And those are mitigating that risk, because you know, when you're skipping the due diligence that you would normally do, you know, there's obviously opens up to risk, whether it's, you know, doing a septic field inspection and a water test and whatever else might normally be done when there's ample time.
Yeah, and we weren't allowed in. Like, they were working at home, they work out of their house. So we tried to get a second showing, but we were refused a second showing. So we didn't have time to go back and do the due diligence. It was just jump in on both feet and figure it out. And the people loved the house, they wanted it, so.
Right, and
Hey, Larry, what I've been putting in my offers now is, you know, as a term fundamental to the contract of being able to go back within reasonable notice, 24 hours, to view the property before the rescission period ends. So that'll kind of give you the window to get in there, make that offer and compete, but still give you time to do a little due diligence and make an amendment to the contract if you see something you don't like. With the possibility that your clients understand that, the rescission period will cost them money.
Well,
if they choose the rescission,
and they may want to make a potential amendment, but they may not be able to. So I mean, any sort of amendment like that would have to come in agreement. And those terms, coming back and viewing prior to the end of the rescission is one thing, but what's the goal of that? Are you just coming to view it? Because if it's just coming into view, then I mean, that's an easy one. There's no metric as far as approval or anything like that. So you have to be careful with some of these terms that are ambiguous. The property, for example, will be left in a clean and tidy manner. What's your definition of clean and tidy? Probably a little different than mine. And it's almost always different between a seller and a buyer. So those types of clauses, when we see them, as listing agents, or we're writing them in as buyer agents, we have to be clear that the seller might think it's clean and tidy. Maybe the cleanest the house has ever been. They've lived there for 20 years and they're like, wow, this looks great. The buyer comes in and it's like, what the hell is this? So, when we talk about adding terms and stuff like that, we have to be really specific, and we have to have a really clear metric on what that term is and how it is going to be justified and measured. Having a professional cleaner come in and provide a receipt, I mean, you can hire Molly Maid to come in and give you a bill for a couple $100, or you can hire the professional cleaner on Facebook and come in. They're going to do 2 different jobs, give you 2 different receipts. Who decides that it's reasonable? And if the buyer needs to decide that what is reasonably clean, then the buyer really should be getting the cleaner in there that they want to go in and clean it before they get possession of it. David, you have your hand up one more time, David, or are you done?
It's okay. I was just going to say that, like, the primary role that we serve is to mitigate this anxiety and help people remember when they're walking through that they're potentially going to write a $500,000, $1 million contract on what they're seeing, and to remind them of that when they're really impressed with the cabinets or the fridge, that they have to look at all the details. That's why they pay us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Ultimately, it's managing expectations and helping them understand, what they're paying for and what they're getting. All the little bits, all the pretty little, moldings and millwork and cabinets, but also, the 20-year-old furnace or the 20-year-old roof or the 20-year-old windows. It's all the bits, and sometimes it's easy for some buyers to get caught up in all the shiny things. And not give enough value to some of the things that are less shiny. So
Yeah, it's gonna help them understand all the risks and eliminate surprises. You don't want them on moving day, discovering things that ought to have been discovered or at least talked about as a risk before that.
totally, yeah.
I like that, having that really in-depth conversation with them, saying, hey, this is potentially the reason why we're reviewing this. Is this potentially a place that you might really want to be in? So I want you to outline all the things that you like and love about it, and more importantly, all the stuff that you don't, because that's going to help us, if we write an offer, choose what we want included and excluded, especially. Because I had a situation in one of my possessions recently where, my client didn't like a shelf that he thought should have been taken out, but it was affixed to the structure, and it was a built-in, but it was deteriorating. And, I wish that I had kind of had this conversation with him ahead of time, saying, listen, if you don't like something in here, make note of it, and we'll make sure that it's not there when we get possession, should we write an offer. So, I mean, the preparation aspect of it is so huge, and it's something that I kind of overlooked as a newbie. but I'm learning, I'm learning through, doing, unfortunately. And it really comes down to having that conversation with your client too. Remember, we might be in a competition situation. What's a deal breaker? What can you live with and what can you live without? What are you willing to get rid of on your own? Or do you really want to insert that into the offer when we're competing with other offers, right? So
And if we want that shelf removed, let's be prepared to, accept whatever the condition of the wall is or whatever behind it, sometimes. You're almost always going to get nail holes, or there's probably going to be a little paint discoloration. Those types of things, we just have to understand are going to be there unless we get a seller to agree to mud and paint the entire house before they hand over the keys to us, right? So, Emily?
Yeah, I have a bit of a question. So the offer I just put in, my client wanted the kitchen island. It's not a fixed, like it's on wheels, but I put it in the included items. And we got a counter and everything, and the agent never like mentioned anything. Should I be saying something? I don't want to,
Is it written in the contract?
It is.
Then it should
Okay.
be. It should be there on completion. We just had a challenge actually last week. It was an expensive one for the Pemberton Homes Realtor. It cost them $5,000. But it was a multiple offer situation. Our realtor had wrote in to include all the furnishings as viewed, plus a bunch of other other items like kitchenwares and all that stuff. Buyer got keys to the property, furniture was gone, everything was removed. Sure enough, it's all written into the contract. Contacted the listing agent. Turns out that didn't read the contract, just got the sellers to sign it and went to completion. He's handed over. The furniture, coincidentally, belonged to a staging company that the owner of the property had hired to place in the home. And so the seller did return all of the kitchenwares and tools and stuff like that. But ultimately the listing realtor cut a check for $5,000 to replace the furniture that was included in the contract that he admitted to not reading and reviewing and understanding. So yeah, really
There goes a chunk of the commission.
to read. What's that?
There goes a chunk of that commission. Wow.
Yeah,
He
but
he had to put back this staged furniture.
well, $5,000 to the buyer for compensation because they thought they were getting the furniture. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I
Well,
just
at
don't
least the
want to be
staging company will
sneaky or
probably sell it.
anything.
Yeah. In the end, always read more than just the first page of the contract. That's
No kidding.
That's a
Yeah.
tough lesson to learn, but yeah.
That's a
Okay.
good point, Emily. Like I did the same thing with one of my offers. We saw one of those chest beds, those Murphy beds that kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
look like a hutch or whatever. And I just kind of slipped that in the inclusions after like 2 sets of keys and fob and mail keys and chest bed. And I was like, should I bring that to the attention of the listing agent? That would probably be, a professional courtesy, but I just kind of left it there and it was kind of an afterthought. And I'm glad that it was there on possession day. But I mean, I think, what do you think, Darren? What do you think, Ron? I mean, is it professional courtesy to say, oh, by the way, my client really likes this and we want to include that in our offer, like make them aware of it?
I mean, when you're presenting your offer to the listing agent and you're going over some of the details, it never hurts to bring that kind of stuff up. Ultimately, you're not responsible for making sure that they read the contract. But there is an element, like if there's something a little obscure, absolutely, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of professional courtesy saying, hey, we're kind of looking at this, we really like the way this is, so we've asked for it to be included, that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's a riding lawnmower that's in the shed, sometimes it's a Murphy bed, sometimes it's something that isn't necessarily thanks, Ron. Sometimes it isn't necessarily what you would typically expect. So I mean, bringing it to their attention, definitely a professional courtesy, but truly it is not your responsibility to make sure that they read the contract.
Okay, yeah, because it's kind of past that point now. We've got a counter, so now it might be kind of weird to say, hey, just want to make sure you saw that.
Yeah.
But I have everything like, fridge, stove, and then under it says kitchen island, so it's
Yeah.
there. So,
Totally good,
okay.
yeah.
I don't know, I just felt kind of bad, but whatever.
Never, don't feel
Darren?
bad.
Darren,
Yeah,
a Murphy bed, excuse me, you wouldn't have to specifically state a Murphy bed as, part of the deal, because that's a fixture on the wall, isn't it?
not always.
Different kind, right?
Sometimes it's a
Oh.
cabinet that just sits on the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
That
so if
pulls out.
if it is affixed to the wall, would the mattress be a chattel and that would be optional?
You know what, maybe, but no, I don't think so, because it's part of the bed or the system. Honestly, if you're ever unsure about anything, just write it in the inclusions. Yeah, if there's ever any gray area, don't leave it to chance, write it in there. It doesn't matter. That's the one way to make sure that it's addressed appropriately.
So
I've
Dave-
always done anything out of the ordinary. I've had the client sign it like I do the initial, so that it forces the other side to initial that they've seen it.
Mm.
So at least
Yeah.
it takes care of all indecisions.
Yeah.
what happens when they don't follow through on something that you've included? I mean, it comes down to, is it going to be worth your time and hassle to, to go after this in a legal manner? I mean, I had something similar or lately that was just really small, but I mean, it's kind of an annoyance to say the least. Was one of, the places that I sold my clients had a garage door, opener. It had a mechanical system, but they didn't actually have the opener for it. So the only way you could open or close the door is from the inside when the button on the wall. So, but I had, garage door opener as an inclusion in there. And then on the date of possession, saw the keys on the table, but I didn't see the garage door opener. So, I mean, the listing agent just happened to come by because she's the neighbor. And she came and took the lockbox off. And I said, well, where's the garage door opener that was included in the contract? Oh, there never was one.
Well, if they're included in the contract, then that's conversation. Well, you need to provide them, or the seller needs to provide them. So that's a simple conversation with the listing realtor. If the listing realtor is not willing to have a conversation, then then get me involved and I'll have a conversation with the managing broker. Because they can provide replacements or aftermarket or something. But if they're included in the contract and the buyer wants them, and they've agreed to provide them, it doesn't matter that, oh, they were lost a long time ago. We've agreed to provide them.
Isn't that a wording question though? Because if I heard garage door opener, push the button on the inside of the garage, it opens up, as opposed to remotes.
Yep. Would you have included remotes in that contract?
I'd have to go back and look. I think
That arguably is a key too. When we're writing down those included items, we've talked about it before. The more specific we can be, the better. Garage door opener and remotes. Hot tub pool or hot tub cover and accessories, all that kind of stuff. Like the more specific verbiage you can add to your contract, the easier it's going to be to enforce. In a gray area situation, if you've included a garage door opener but no remotes, what I would do is I would probably find the make and model of the garage door opener and order a couple of them from Amazon and then drop them off at the house.
yeah, no, just says garage door opener. Gonna have to change that in my template.
Anything included, there's a very historic practice of, I've seen it over the years where, it's F, D, S, D, W, like single letters representing fridge, stove, washer, dryer, dishwasher. It's poor practice. It's lazy. It's unprofessional. It's a shortcut. And I would think that our clients have higher expectations of us than taking little lazy shortcuts. And they want us to draft an enforceable contract. We shouldn't have anything that is gray or questionable. And when it comes to those included items, be specific. You know, if you have to identify the brand of the fridge, identify the serial number of the fridge, whatever it may be, maybe it's just the brand and the color, whatever it may be specific. That will avoid, you know, some challenges down the road. We see a lot of problems develop over very gray terms and gray descriptions and assumptions. The more specific we are, the less assuming there's going to be.
I have a quick question. So with my listing, I had all the keys, but I didn't have the fob. And so I was asking and they're not sure, they never had a car, they're looking for it. So if they don't find the fob, which was in the contract, do I just like order one from the Strata? Like, what am I supposed to do in that situation?
Are they provided by the Strata?
I'm actually not sure. I'll have to find out.
Most
Yeah,
Yeah.
find out who provides them, because it would be a building system operation, right?
Like there's
So
no fob for the front door. I just assume it's one of those it's like a garage door opener remote to open the garage, the parkade door. It's
Yeah.
old school, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, if they never had one, you know, check with the Strata to see how they're issued. The Strata would have a record if one was issued.
okay,
So maybe check with the Strata and find out if one was ever issued.
okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's in your offer and they agree to it, then it should be up to them to get it for you. I mean, I've seen situations
Yeah.
where, you know, I just put in, you know, my template of, you know, fridge, stove, oven, range hood, microwave, and then, you know, people have scratched out, like the listing agent scratched out microwave because there wasn't one, and I totally missed that, right? But it's making sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's. If there was never one and they never crossed it out, then they have to provide one, right?
Yeah, but I mean, in that situation, you know, I mean, most I know that a lot of condo developments, like they have a button fob and then they just have a keychain fob. Like I know in my building, I've got one that I can wave by the front door, but
Yeah.
you know, to get underground parking, I have a button fob, which also opens the front door and operates the elevator, but it's also got a button to open up the garage door, right? So,
Okay.
I mean, it might be a matter of, you know, paying a $25 deposit to get a garage door opener.
Okay.
But if we're, you know, we should figure out if one was ever issued. And then two, where is it if it was, and if not, how do we get one?
Okay.
It shouldn't be like that kind of thing won't be, you know, overly like taxing or expensive or crazy.
Mhm.
But if there is one that was issued, you know,
Gotta find it.
yeah. Well,
And let-
Mark's daughter probably has it.
Yeah, she's like, I think I saw it somewhere.
Might be in her car still in Kimberly.
I'm like, oh boy. So, yeah.
Okay, everybody, good conversation. If there's nothing else to touch on, it's 10:15. We'll kind of get on our way. So if you got anything else, please feel free to speak up. Otherwise, we will reconvene Zoom, I guess, next Wednesday. Yeah.
Karen,
Yeah,
can I stay on with you just for a minute?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Darren.
Appreciate it.